So I'd like to introduce you all to Ben Lee. He is the Partnerships and Campaign Lead at Beryl, and he will be leading tonight's session.
Hi everyone, thanks for that introduction, Jessica. So yeah, hi, my name's Ben. I'm the Partnership and Campaigns Lead here at Beryl. So what I'm going to do is just go through this deck here, just titled Transport for All, the role of micromobility, and I'm just going to introduce who we are and how we work in all our schemes across the UK. And then I'll show you how we're doing things to increase access and to engage new riders. And then, like Jessica mentioned, we'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end where you can feel free to ask me questions and things which can come up on the presentation and things which you just want to know about within the micromobility world. So I'll crack on now. And then, yeah, any things that you have that you want to ask in the chat question below, you can do so. And then we'll try to pick that up at the end. So as an introduction for who we are, in case if there's people here who don't know us, we are based in London and we currently have just about 115 people working here within HQ. And then we do have scheme teams out in all different areas, which I'll go on to in a little bit, which all have their team members too. And we are currently the only micromobility company in the country to have and be able to offer out all three micromobility vehicles of bikes, e-bikes and scooters all in one app ecosystem. We do have a tech background and we are the technology partners for main providers. So although we do have our own bikes, which are a bright green, so you can easily see them if you are in one of our scheme areas, we also provide our technology for other partners such as Transport for London, Transport for West Midlands, Transport for Greater Manchester, and also DOT in New York. So we do have a tech background and we did kind of pivot over towards the operational side of things too. We do have an in-house platform, which means we do have full control over the whole system, both from the tech side of things to the actual logistical side of things and the operational side. And we currently have 7 live systems within the UK. So we've got BCP, which is Bournemouth Christchurch Pool, where we offer out bikes and scooters. We have Hereford, which has just bikes and e-bikes. We have the Isle of Wight, which is just e-scooters. We have Norwich, which has all three. So we've got bikes, e-bikes and e-scooters. And we also have Watford, where we have bikes and e-bikes. We are the technology provider for Transport for London. So all the tracking that gets done on the Santander bikes down here in London is done by us. We're also the tech provider for Transport for West Midlands. And we also provide their app function. So to actually access the Transport for West Midlands bikes, you do have to download the Beryl app. And that's how you can access it. And then launching next month, rather excitingly, is Manchester. So we're working with Transport for Greater Manchester, and we are operating their bike share system as well. There's currently over 3,000 bikes and scooters that we have across all these different areas. And since the beginning, we've now got over 1.2 million journeys. We're averaging about 5,000 journeys each day, with currently BCP being Bournemouth Christchurch Pool being the second biggest bike share system outside London, which will soon be overtaken by Manchester when it's fully launched. So like I say, it says they're launching next month, but we're hoping to be fully operational with all bikes and things like that by next spring. So I'm just going to talk you through the Beryl system now. So using our technology that I mentioned before and live tracking and other out-of-bay fees, what we're trying to do is create a system where you don't have to have physical docks. So I think one of the main difference between us and other companies, especially with the Santander bikes in London, which are probably most visible and most well known, is that here in London you have those physical docking stations where you have to physically push the bike in, a little bit like you're seeing here in the image. But what we've done is we've restricted back a little bit, and just using our technology and live tracking and things like that, we've been able to create a system where the council doesn't need to pay for these big, massive, clunky sort of park infrastructures. So you can just have a painted space and we will just have to point people towards where to park the bikes. In this image here, you can kind of see what that looks like. It's essentially like a car parking space. So a lot of questions that we have is it a bit like Offo bikes or Mo bikes, where it was a bit like Wild West, where bikes would be dotted around everywhere, thrown in canals because there were no docking stations like we have here in London, like these Santander ones. So what we do is, like I mentioned previously, we do have the live tracking function where we can make sure that people are parking in bay itself. And we also have the out of bay fee. Now, this fee is essentially a fine for if you don't park within the painted areas, which are shown on the app. And we've done some testing between £5 to £10, and we can't really see it as being any major difference between those two price points as a fine. And overall, we are seeing really high compliance rate from around a 95, 97% rates. So it's really good. We get really good bay compliance, and whatever fears there are about people not parking in bays because there is no physical docking space is currently unfounded when it comes to Beryl systems and Beryl schemes. What we've essentially found out is that the more density of bays does help this as well, because if there are bays close by, the people are more likely to park it in there themselves. So we try to make sure that there's always a bay close by to people. As you can see here, this image is Bournemouth Quiet Church and Pool, where you can see just how close by these bays are. So it would be almost quite hard to not park it in a bay. So therefore people will always park in a bay, or they will get fined. This plus the cheap way of riding, which is currently you can get minute bundles, which gives it to 5p a minute, makes it quite an attractive option for people to use. And for us, what we've learned is the more bays equals the easier it is for people to park and to use, so therefore there are more journeys. And because of how our bays work, and without having to have big clunky infrastructures and big clunky parking docks themselves, there's basically more space. So we can afford to put in bays such as ones that you saw on this image where it is just painted because it's just easy to put in. However, if a council did want to put in physical infrastructure, we can do that as well. This image here is in Norwich, where you can see it has a rack with a sort of wire which you can put through the locks. This is also the way it's being done in Watford. So if a council did want to put a physical apparatus here on the streets themselves, we can do that for them. Just going through a few of these pictures as well, so you can see the different types of parking bays we have. So alongside the paints, we've got these ones. Like I said, it has the little racks. We have these sort of systems, which is what it's going to be looking like in Manchester. So if any of you guys are going up to Manchester from November onwards, you will start seeing these ones popping up where it is drilled into the ground themselves, but there's no actual technological infrastructure there. It is literally just a bay, so it looks visual, so there is a place for people to park the bays in. So it's kind of a hybrid function. And the real big song and dance in terms of a bay for us is the parklets, where if, again, a council does have funding, they can use it in this interesting way. So instead of spending money previously where we've done it on old school heavy metal bays, what we've done is we've come up with these parklet schemes, which we can see are quite easy on the eye, it's aesthetically pleasing. And it includes places to sit on either side. So on the left and the right, you can see the planters there, and there are benches there for you to sit. This adds beauty to the area, that adds value to the area, and also the soil within all the plants does help soak up all the rain. We've actually done an interesting study here in Norwich, where this coffee shop in the picture, when it had this parklet installed, it increased revenue by 22%. So what the parklets do is it also drives footfall to the areas where people are parking the bikes and the scooters, because people are naturally going to finish their journeys there, and they are naturally going to think, oh, you know what, I might go to coffee. So there are commercial reasons really for why people and why councils would quite like to have parklets. In terms of visualization, if any of you guys are from Manchester or you're looking to go up there, this is what we are envisioning the Manchester scheme to look like. So in terms of the docks, it's going to have that sort of parking bay sort of element to it, but we're also going to have dotted around planters aside, which have directions, which in a way creates a sort of LTN for the council. Just to go through a bit about the actual bikes themselves, if any of you have ridden a Beryl bike before, it is very nimble. It is a lot lighter and easier to handle than the bikes here in London, for example, or any of those similar sort of bikes. They all have the same technology. The one at the bottom is obviously an e-bike. The only difference being it is a bit heavier because of the battery, and the actual electric battery is on the rear wheel, as you can see there at the back. Other than that, those bikes are essentially the same, but because the e-bike has a battery in the back, it also has an additional place for you to put your belongings. So yep, so this is e-bikes. Both our bikes, the bike and the e-bike, all have the laser light. So this is how the company actually started. If you've been in London before and you've seen bikes where it shoots out the green bike in the front, that is how the company started. I mean, it evolved over to a bike share operator. What the laser light does is it helps drivers see you if there's coming around a blind corner, or they just can't see you because it's a bit dark potentially. It reduces blind spots, and we think, and basically the data come back to say that it helps 33% to help you be seen 33% more. These are the scooters that we are currently using, which are in Norwich and Bournemouth and the Isle of Wight. There are currently plans to put the laser light on here, but as it stands, it's just using our pixel lights, which are our other light functions. In areas where we have all three, so we're talking about Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole and Norfolk, some people might think that the introductory scooters might mean people aren't riding our bikes anymore, but as you can see from this data here, it's actually complementing vehicles. So while scooters are driving high usage, as you can see from this chart, it's not really pushing down the use of bikes or e-bikes at all. So it's very much complementing the micromobility sort of ecosystem rather than taking over and stopping people using the bikes or e-bikes. All our systems are run by the operations teams within the schemes. So in all those areas that we're running, they have a dedicated team which go out and about, and they help maintain the bikes constantly to make sure that they're safe to ride and they're always rideable. In many places where we can, we try to use local companies like ZFI in Norwich or Petty Cargo in Hereford, and that's if we don't do everything all by ourselves. Whenever we are doing batch stops and maintenance work, we do try to use zero emission vehicles such as this e-cargo bike, as you can see. And the way that our schemes know when, for example, batteries need to be swapped, it's all run via a engineering platform. So the bicycle, the e-bike and the e-scooter essentially talks to the engineering background. So if a battery is low or if a battery needs repair, this will get pinged over to our schemes, and they then know where they need to go to swap batteries and redistribute bikes and scooters where necessary. And just as another thing I thought would be quite good, as we are talking about data, is this is an example of a dashboard that we can help provide partners. So this kind of shows a snapshot of just how people are riding the bikes, the e-bikes and the e-scooters. And through all that data, we can kind of make cool heat maps like this to show where bikes are being ridden, to see where the most popular places are. And as you can see, this is coming from our partners at TfL. In terms of the future, we think we are basically the micromobility world, and Beryl, hopefully, we are a fundamental part of transport infrastructure that's both green and healthy, and we want to be at the heart of that, as that is a very worthy cause, and we think it is the future of transport and mobility. We do think cargo bikes are going to be a big part of this, and it's going to be a main driver of us for getting people to get out of their private vehicles, because that is one of our missions. It is the mission essentially, really, to get people out of their private car usage and then make that modal shift. And we think cargo bikes will help that, because it means people will maybe no longer need to have their own cars to create the shopping, for example. This got launched in Hackney last month, and it is the UK's first cargo bike share scheme. So it's all very exciting. There's 8 around Hackney, which serves 3 councils. They are stored in sheds, which you can see at the back there. So you have to use the app to open up the cargo bike shed, and then you can hire out these cargo bikes for whatever you need for your shopping or whatever. And commercial businesses can also use it if they want to, for example, deliver their baked goods or flowers to customers. They can use this, and it's very exciting this, because this is, like I mentioned, the UK's first cargo bike share scheme, and it's really interesting to see where this is going to go and what we can learn from this and how we can implement this system across into all our different scheme areas. So just to give you a bit of a wider background on how we've worked so far. So what I'm going to do is go through Norwich, because that came in, that obviously has all three vehicles, bikes, e-bikes and scooters. We started serving that area in 2019, so it's been just over a couple of years now. Since launch, we have over 600 bikes and e-bikes and 250 scooters. We have 3,500 over 30, we have 35,000 unique users and over 275,000 trips registered. And the interesting thing is that after each trip, we do go through surveys to see and ask some questions. And one question is, what would you have done if you didn't use this vehicle? And we have so far replaced 23% of the trips, which would have been done via a car. And we're currently working on new things at the moment. One of those is an extension of the e-bike network, and then potentially now looking at cargo bikes and how we can slot that into Norwich as well. And this is just our Norwich bikes all being serviced, be kept up to date. And as you can see there, the rack is where they are locked in. So to go on now a little bit more into the partnerships and how we are helping the bike share system and micromobility in general access to most amount of people and to get everyone using it, is that we try to make the bike share open for all and want to give back to the community. The main thing for us on this side of things is we want to lower the barriers to access. We're trying to think of different ways we can do this. Some are traditional and some are thinking out the box. So I'm just going to go through a few of these examples as well. What we like to do is partner up with different companies as well, with like-minded partners who all support the same sort of things. So one of those offers would be free rides for NHS and key workers. I'll go into that a little bit more now, but this is just a snapshot of, I'll go through that a little bit more later, but it's just a snapshot really of the sort of things that we've done with them. So we've partnered up with a company called Celesti in Norwich who helped fund free rides for key workers. And we also worked with the Bournemouth universities to also help fund the NHS workers so they can have access to bikes during the past 18 months. Making sure people can access the vehicles from all backgrounds is also a big part of us. So we do like to encourage those, because like I mentioned before, we are looking to lower the barriers to access. And one way that we're doing this is working with DWP and Job Centre Plus, specifically on their Kickstarter program, where we are helping people find meaningful employment. And what we're finding, well, what Job Centre Plus are finding, is that the transport to work is one of the reasons why people are finding work difficult to come by. So what we're doing with them is working together to provide their first month's transport free. So that can be via a bike or a scooter. So they can get to and from work every day. So therefore transport isn't a reason why they can't get a meaningful job. And then from that point on, as long as they are still being meaningfully employed, they will always get half price rights. So that's one way that we're working with DJP and Job Centre Plus to increase those that should reach for our riders. We're also working on environmental projects. So we've got different initiatives. So we're doing things like pedal and picks, which we are currently running in Bournemouth, and we are working with Planet Patrol to see if we can do something similar in all our other schemes, where essentially we get volunteers and work for the community to go out and pick litter up from beaches, and we're doing it on Beryl Bikes. And then we also like to involve all the community champions within our scheme areas. I mean, we do this through a bike share equity program, and this will provide access of our vehicles for underrepresented groups. So to give an example, in Watford, we're working with Evolve, which is a women's cycling club for absolute beginners, predominantly around Muslim women as well. We're working with Dorset Mine in Bournemouth and also YMCA. And this is what we're doing, is providing complimentary minutes, because we do believe that having access to a bike is probably one reason why people aren't riding that much. So to go through a bit more about the campaigns that we are running, one thing which hopefully you all heard about so far is our partnership with Bikeability Trust. This is where we are providing people access to our bikes by a 300 Beryl minute bundle, and then after they pass that course, they get a 10% off a Beryl minute bundle. I mentioned previously the work we're doing with key workers and the NHS, and with this we actually enabled over 10,000 rides across the country in 2020. And we helped fund most of that, but we did that alongside some other partners to fund 7,152 free minutes for key workers. And it's really cool the stats we got from that, because as mentioned previously, data is very much in our blood here in Beryl. And these NHS key workers, they rode over 23,000 kilometers, and they each ride average 3.5 kilometers, and we got 400 new rides from it. So this definitely helped spread the word about Beryl and helped spread the word of how you can use a bike and a scooter to get to and from work, and it is a viable alternative. And I'm happy to say that people have kept on riding since campaigns and offers like this, which is the ideal scenario. One thing what we're also doing is working with higher education providers to help them achieve any sort of active travel plans they may have, and feeding sustainability goals. Not only higher education, but we're also working with corporate partners and local councils to help provide ridership there and help provide use of our bike scooters so that they can also use it. And it's being rode phenomenally. I think these partnerships sort of show just how powerful it can be when a provider and when a company works together with a micromobility company like Beryl to help give out access to vehicles at subsidized rates to help get people moving. They are going to take it. So for example, you can see this data here from Bournemouth University. This is just a snapshot from one quarter. They had over 5,500 journeys. They went over 21,000 kilometers. And we're having last year, we had over 1,300 people using it from Bournemouth. So these are just some of the ways which we are helping provide access to our bikes, to our partners, and to new people in our schemes. That was basically the snapshot I wanted to give you all from how we're doing things at Beryl. And I'm sure you've got lots of questions from that, and I'm happy to take them alongside Patrick if there's any questions that you may have from the Bikeability Trust side as well. So what I'll do is I'll just work out how to stop sharing. And here we go. I think
that was great. Thank you, Ben. And I've just popped in the chat my email address. So if any of you haven't claimed your 3 minutes, thanks to Beryl, and would like to, then I can provide some unique codes for either yourself or any adult learners that you might have who would benefit from that offer. So we've got one question here, but if anybody would like to submit anything to the Q&A chat, now's your time. But we'll get kick-started with a question from Isabel, saying that she's very interested in looking at how cycle share operators like Beryl can support the mobility of disabled people with all your products. Can you just talk a little bit about what your thinking so far is on that and your plans for the future?
Yeah, so adaptive vehicles is definitely something which we are looking at, and it's actually a conversation that has come from the last month or so with various councils. So I'm happy to say it isn't just us that are driving the need for this. Councils themselves are also seeing that this is a sector which is underserved. So we are looking at prototypes now of how we can help create vehicles which are accessible for lots of different people, regardless of what disabilities they do have. And I think we should be seeing some prototypes and things on the road relatively soon. I'm not going to say it's going to be this year or next year, but we are researching things. We are getting prototypes over to see exactly what we can do. But I think the key thing here really is that it's not just us saying that we need to do this as well. There is now movement from the council side of things who want to implement these vehicles on the street, which I think is great news.
Thanks, Ben. That's really helpful. And as I say, yeah, if anybody else has any other questions, then you can pop them in the Q&A. We have got one from Nancy. So obviously the discount that we advertise is for 16 plus. Do you have any bikes for young adults and children, Ben?
No, so we can only provide them for 16 plus as well.
Yeah, and that's a legal thing,
yeah,
isn't
that
it?
is, yeah,
that's the legality of hire.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, there's no other questions. Perhaps I could jump in and ask Ben a question. Is that all
Yes,
right?
please.
Yeah. Ben, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the experiences people are having with training, because I think there's training going on in various of your centres, aren't there? And it'd be really interesting, I think, for those on the call. There's a few from, obviously, from the instructor world and instructor trainer world that'd be really interested to get us some feedback on that.
Yeah, so the partnership with Bikeability Trust is basically to help. I know it was originally thought of like, so when families come to do a bikeability course, potentially the kids have bikes they got for birthdays or Christmas, but maybe the parents don't have a bike anymore. So we would step in for that and help provide bikes. And it's a really simple process of doing. I know Jessica said she put it in the chat area as well, but you better just get in touch with Jessica, and then we can help provide you with a code, and that code helps provide access to you or the people on the course to have access to our bikes for the duration of that course. And as I mentioned, after that, you do get a discount for minute bundles once you've completed the bikeability course. From our side of things, we have also started implementing a scooter training program. This is both in person and in a digital format. Benjamin from Bikeability Trust has helped us set up the scooter training, because we did need to get eyes on it from lots of different ways to make sure that we're doing it correctly. And this takes place with bikeability instructors who have trained as well as scooter instructors, and they run in-person training. That takes place in the evening. We had to basically do a course, so you learn how to scoot properly, the rules of it all, and the best way of doing it. And then the digital side of things is being launched. It's in development now, and I think launch will be towards the end of this year, and that will be rolled out nationwide. So within all our scheme areas, regardless of if it's in-person training, you will have access to that. And I believe it's going to be access out to everyone, regardless of if it's in the Beryl scheme area, because it's all going to be done online.
Thanks, Ben.
Yes, thanks, Ben. That's really helpful. And yeah, the development team, Benjamin and Patrick and Rosa, have been quite involved in that process. And I think it's something that you've found really interesting, Patrick, isn't it? So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more from your side shortly, but we'll go on to some other questions first. So Graham said he kind of refers to what you'd said earlier about the kind of OFO bike situation of them being strewn all over the place. Do you still suffer with that issue of equipment turning up in odd locations?
No, thankfully not. Like I said, we do get really high compliance rate, so it is between 95 and 97%. We don't really get them out in odd places. Some places that we get them are just people who leave them at their homes potentially, and they're just doing it because they're just lazy. They just want to leave it there. So we have to then go pick it up, because as I mentioned, it is all bikes are tracked. We don't track the user, we track the asset, which is the bike. So when something's not being used, when something's locked and it's out of bay and it's somewhere which is so weird, we will go out there and get it. So sometimes we have had to drive out to the sticks somewhere in one of our scheme areas to get a bike from someone because they left it outside the house. I know it's had a couple of times where people have tried to put it in the back garden, so we've had to go and knock on the doors and get it out from the back garden. So there's not been anything weird as such, but I'm also happy to say that is very, very rare that happens, because we do get really good bake compliance rate. Because I think the difference between us and Offer and Mobike is that what very Beryl works is we do it in conjunction in lots of partnership with councils. So we do have that buy-in from councils, and people will therefore see it as taking, for example, let's take for example Norwich. They see it as much as it's a Beryl bike system, they all see it as a Norwich bike system. So they don't want to trash their own system. So therefore, people will be more protective of it and a bit more. Yeah, they'll respect it a little bit more.
That's interesting, thank you. And I think that also answers Ian's question, which was about the security of the bikes, and that they, as you've said now, they are tracked. So that is how that side of things is done. And then we've also got somebody asking a follow-up really to the age limit, saying, how do you ensure personal identity and security read-alone of the vehicle? What's the process of that?
So for the scooters, you do have to take a picture of your ID, your driving license, for example, your passport, and then you have to take a selfie, and then that gets sent in to us, which we then use a third party to match them together. So you couldn't take your parents' driving license, for example, and then use it yourself because it just wouldn't match. So that's the way that we get around it, and that's from our side of things. But from a more proactive way of doing it, also we work closely with the police in all our areas. So we have weekly meetings. We have a community and police liaison officer here who reports weekly with the local police forces, so we can see. We talk about vandalism rates. We talk about what's going on. Have there been any misuse? And because there's that relationship between us and the police, we are always talking. We are looking at ways outside of just app-based technology. How else can we get people to drive it legally? And that plus local outreach we're doing with training courses and with promotional posters showing people the correct way to scoot. These are ways that we're trying to get around all that sort of stuff, that misuse.
That's great, thank you. And we've also got a good bit of a clarifying question from Gaynor, which I think would be really helpful actually. So specifically electric scooters, can you give us a really brief overview of what the rules are as it is at the moment? You know, can you ride on roads? Is it footpaths? Is there a speed limit? Just let us give everybody that background.
The easiest one, speed limit, yeah. So each scooter is locked at 12.5 miles an hour. So that is the maximum it can go. All those ones that you see zooming on the street, down, they are fully illegal. And that's nothing to do with us. So that is a wider sort of governmental level sort of educational program that needs to be done there. In terms of how you ride it, you have to treat it like a bike. So they can't go on pavements, they can't go on just walkways, but they can go on cycle paths. So everywhere where a bike can go legally, like shared use paths, for example, and cycle lanes, that's where scooters can go. But no, they can't go on like pavements, for example.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And then we've got another technical question from Ian about how the charging works. Is it when they're docked that the charge works, or is it for another method?
No, so if it's in a place like Norwich, for example, or Watford, where there are docks, those docks are just, it's aesthetics, and it helps a little bit more safety, because if you can remember, it's a rack with one of those bike wires, and the wire is supposed to go in between the locks, because the locks are behind the rear wheel, so you kind of lock it to the rack that way. But in terms of the charging points, that is all it is. So it's not charged within the docks. What happens is the scooters and e-bikes talk to our engineering system. So whenever a battery is below a certain percent, they will then go out there to swap the batteries. So if they are literally taking a fully charged battery from the warehouse and depot to where the scooters and e-bikes are, and they're unplugging the old one, putting in a new one, and bringing that one back to the warehouse to recharge. So if you're eyeing an area where there's a Beryl scheme, or if you're not into wanting to see how this works a little bit more, if you download the Beryl app and you go to a place where there are e-bikes, so for example Watford or Norwich or Hereford, when you zoom into where all the bays are to see how many bikes there are in the place you're at, it actually says how much percent battery there is and how many more minutes there are. So let's say you have an e-bike which has 100 minutes left, but there's another e-bike next to it which has half an hour left. I mean, it won't get that low because we'll change it, but if you see those two bikes next to them, you can see on the app which one has more charge, so you can choose which one to get. And that kind of works in the same way, where it talks to our engineers in the back, so then they can see, oh, this one's really low, we need to put this when we're doing the rounds to go and get the batteries to swap them.
That's great, thanks Ben, and thanks for everybody's questions. I think I have got them all, but if you have asked something and it's been lost in the chat, either pop it in the Q&A or just pop it in the chat again. And whilst we're letting you think about any questions you may have, Patrick, we said a little bit earlier about the training side of things. Have you got any kind of thoughts or insights that you want to add to this that would be useful?
Well, it's certainly something that we're considering and thinking about, obviously, with Beryl and other people in the industry. And I actually know David Dansky's on the call. I think he's on the call anyway. And he's been working a lot in this space with Bikeworks and producing training for e-scooter use. And he was talking to us last week in a call with Como UK and talking about the relatively easy transition for cycling instructors to instructing scooting. And I was going to follow this up with Ben and ask Ben what Beryl's preferred training method would be and what they would recommend to DFT if they were in the position to be able to recommend to DFT, which I guess is quite a big voice in the micromobility sector. You will be consulted on this, like I think you would be anyway. So
yeah, it's a straight, like, excuses are such a tricky subject right now, and I think we all need to come together and decide the best way of doing it. So I think what we're doing, in-person training and digital training platform, is for sure the best way of doing it. If it's the most practical and the way of getting out there to the most amount of people, I mean, that's a question it's still to be asked, and that's part of the process of having these systems in place, is to see how they are run and how they are picked up. So yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky one. I'm also not the one that lobbies on that side of things, so
no,
I wouldn't know the official Beryl answer as such on that. But it is.
I'll put you on the spot there, Ben.
Yeah, but we definitely think that there is some sort of training that needs to be done. There does need to be some sort of educational awareness that needs to be done, but also does have to be a bit less scaremongering that needs to be done on behalf of scooters. I mean, I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure. I know that when bikes first came out, there was a bit of more panic about bicycles as well, right? So the scooters are just the next stage, and I think when you're seeing scooters on the street now, they are everywhere. It's not an accepted form of transport, but it's almost gone too far for it not to be an accepted form of transport. So when the trials are finishing, potentially next March, then there'll be some sort of debates, and there'll be different. I'm sure there'll be other pilots pop up as well within the area. Then maybe by next Christmas, we'll see some sort of legislation within the Queen's Speech or something like that. But I think I think for me, it's a question of when rather than if scooters would become legalized and how it's done.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting listening to one of your competitors in Yeovil in Somerset, who was saying that they had done their training, so that they were on their hire days, they were hosting training at the same time. So you couldn't basically hire without doing some training, and they'd had some really good behaviours as a result of that, great compliance with.
So we've done that for our activation events as well, and we're doing that for every single university that we work with, where there's scooters. So because we know that students are going to be high scooter users, so we kind of get it from the source. So, okay, when you're there, we're there all week for Freshers Week, for example. So then we are going to be there to show you exactly how to use it. When you download the app and you use it for the first time, because let's say you've just moved aboard with our scooters, there's an onboarding process on the app where you have to do a simple sort of questionnaire and see exactly how you use the scooter. So that's another way that we're developing ways of getting people to use these scooters correctly. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can do it within the app, but I think you mentioned the key thing really is in-person sort of education, in-person training.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we're very obviously it's central to our approach for cycling, and that there isn't anything really that can replace that feeling of being in amongst the traffic in a realistic situation and getting used to it that way. Obviously initially traffic free, but just getting used to that interaction and control and communication. It's essential.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think it's a demonstration of this partnership, isn't it? And what we want to do, both at the Bikeability Trust and at Beryl, is use each other's skill sets and knowledge in order to work well. As you said, Ben, it's about working together, isn't it, across the industry, and that's the way that it's going to be embedded in work for everybody. So and I think this is good evidence for that.
So you don't miss it in the chat, Ben. Isabel Clement's come back and put her email address in there, so she'd be very keen for you to make contact, I think.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Isabel. I will. Got it here. Yeah. I'll make a note.
So I don't know if anybody has any last-minute questions. If you do, now is your chance to pop them into the chat or the Q&A. And if not, then we will start to wrap up for the evening. obviously we appreciate you making time in your evening. So the sooner that we can let you go and have some time before Bake Off starts, then we will do that. And as I said earlier, the recording will be available for anybody who might have missed it. And also you'll have seen Ben's email, but if you want to get in touch with him with anything specifically, then I'm sure he would welcome that. And contact me if you want to get some free codes and give a Beryl a go. So Richard, the claiming the 3 minutes. So as an instructor or a member of the bikeability industry, you'll get 300 free minutes. So then you can log on to a Beryl e-bike or e-scooter and you will have those added to your account. So if you want a code for either yourself or any learners who might need access, then just drop me an email and we'll give you a unique code that you could put into the app, and then that will add 300 free minutes to your account.
Remind us, Ben, your locations, because I was just thinking, could I get to one of your locations and have a go on the scooters?
We've got, for the schemes that we run, we've got the Isle of Wight, we've got Norwich, Watford, Hereford, and Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole. They're the ones that we run, and then we also do technology for TFL, the Santander Bikes, and then Transport for West Midlands and Transport for Greater Manchester, which is launching next month.
And the I've forgotten when the trials end, Ben. You did mention it earlier, but I didn't quite catch it.
March, but they keep getting pushed back, so let's see if it does finish in March.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like everybody has asked their questions. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found that useful. When this session ends in a moment, there'll be a pop-up survey. If you could take just a couple of minutes to fill that in and give us some feedback, that would be really helpful, and it helps us plan future webinars and make them as valuable for you as possible. So all that is left to do is thank Patrick very much for his time and Ben for his time as well. And wish you all a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.